Fostering 16 Bobcat kittens is incredibly rewarding because it means 16 sweet little lives were saved. I feel like I'm in a scene from 101 Dalmatians, but with the biggest Bobcat kitten herd you've ever seen. The second I open the door, they stampede into the yard, and I instantly know they're starving. So I get their breakfast ready. I have to stand right there and help them find a bowl. One treat over here, another over there. It's absolute chaos. When it's finally done, I always feel relieved. But that relief never lasts long. Caleb was a licensed wildlife foster, a man who knew the rules by heart. But rules are easy on paper, and much harder when you're feeding 16 hungry mouths, breaking up sibling fights, surviving disaster-level bath days, and watching tiny predators learn how to be wild. Before we start, hit the like button and make sure to subscribe if you haven't, and hit that notification bell so that you won't miss any new stories. Caleb Turner did not mean to become a one-man stampede attraction on a quiet Tuesday morning in western North Carolina, but that is what happened the moment he opened his back door. He had barely turned the knob before 16 Bobcat kittens poured out like somebody had shaken a bag of living ping pong balls. They did not walk into the yard so much as explode into it. Ears tall and ridiculous, legs too long for their bodies, and opinions about breakfast louder than any alarm clock. Caleb stood there in slippers and a faded Smoky Mountain Hardware t-shirt, holding the door open like a bewildered hotel concierge. He had built the enclosure himself with the kind of care usually reserved for a nursery or a porch swing or a coffin. The wood was sanded smooth, the corners rounded, the latches doubled, and the roof reinforced because bobcats are basically tiny escape room champions. He had built it because Blue Ridge Wildlife Rescue needed emergency fosters, and Caleb had said yes too quickly. He had said yes the way a person says yes when the house is too quiet and the phone finally rings. He had said yes because his hands still remembered how to build things, and his heart still needed somewhere to put its noise. Now those 16 little wild lives were his morning routine, his daily comedy show, and occasionally his personal disaster film. They were also, according to the permit paperwork taped inside his kitchen cabinet, absolutely not pets, not friends, and definitely not allowed to ride on his shoulders. Caleb read that last part twice the first day, and then had to read it again out loud on the third day, when a kitten tried to climb him like a tree. He watched them fan out into the yard, sniffing wet grass and pouncing on absolutely nothing with complete confidence. One kit launched itself at a fallen leaf, missed, and then stared at the leaf like it had cheated. Another sprinted in a circle so tight it looked like a wind-up toy, then face-planted into a tuft of clover and acted like that had been the plan. Caleb did the same thing he did every morning now, which was sigh like a man about to referee a sports match. "All right," he told them, voice gentle and sleepy. "Breakfast before you unionize and start making demands." They were starving, or at least they behaved as if they had not eaten since the Great Depression. They charged the feeding station he had set up inside the enclosure, because feeding bobcat kittens outside was basically an invitation to ants and chaos. The moment Caleb set down the bowls, 16 noses went in, 16 tails went up, and the sound became a busy little orchestra of slurps, chomps, and tiny growls of possession. The rescue had trained him well, and Caleb followed the rules like he was handling fine china that also had teeth. Minimal talking, minimal touching, keep the routine consistent, keep their stress low, and keep them wild in their heads. He wore thick sleeves, a face shield when necessary, and he used long-handled tongs for treats like a man feeding sharks at an aquarium. Still, the chaos found him anyway, because chaos loves a schedule and always arrives early. Two kittens decided the same bowl was the only bowl that had ever existed, and they argued in squeaky little snarls. Caleb stepped in, calmly slid a second bowl closer, and watched them ignore it with stubborn devotion. "You're both acting like my cousins at Thanksgiving," he muttered, then nudged a third bowl into their line of sight. That finally worked, because apparently Bobcat logic required a dramatic alternative to make the original bowl less interesting. They separated with offended dignity, each one acting like it had been very generous. Caleb moved along the line, checking for anyone who was not eating, because that was the first sign of trouble. At 16 kittens, you did not notice a problem later, because later was when later turned into an emergency. He counted ears, counted bodies, counted tails, and then counted again because Bobcat kittens have a gift for turning into shadows. 16, he whispered, more to himself than them. Everybody present and causing a disturbance. After breakfast came the part of the morning that felt normal, at least for 10 minutes. Caleb would lock the enclosure, wash his hands like a surgeon, and step inside to start his actual day. He still did some bookkeeping work for the rescue from home, because retirement had never stuck to him properly. He poured coffee, opened his laptop, and tried to remember what it felt like to have a quiet morning. His inbox was full of messages from volunteers, veterinarians, and one very polite county officer who had learned to begin every email with, "Thank you for being licensed." Caleb replied, typed numbers into spreadsheets, and sipped coffee that was always lukewarm now, because there was no such thing as uninterrupted. Outside, the kittens bounced off climbing logs and enrichment platforms Caleb had built like a tiny jungle gym. The rescue had told him to vary textures and heights, to encourage natural behaviors, to let them practice being bobcats. Caleb had nodded, then gone to the garage and built them the kind of playground he wished he could have built for his own kids when they were small. He heard the first crash at 8:13 a.m., followed by a chorus of offended squeaks. Caleb did not flinch anymore, because he had learned the difference between normal crash and something is on fire. This was normal crash, the kind that meant someone had tried to conquer physics and lost. He kept working until 9:30, because that was the next check-in time on his posted schedule. Then he stepped outside with a long feather lure attached to a pole, and 16 heads snapped toward him like he was the star of a very furry courtroom drama. It was playtime, but it was also training, because everything with wildlife was always two things at once. Caleb kept the lure moving unpredictably, letting them chase, letting them miss, letting them learn. He did not let them win too easily, because real prey did not feel sorry for you. He watched their coordination improve day by day, their stalking get quieter, their pounces get smarter, their eyes get sharper. It was impressive and, if he was being honest, a little terrifying in a proud sort of way. They were cute in the way a tiny tornado is cute, right up until it takes your hat. Caleb chuckled when one kit tried to ambush the lure, got distracted by its own tail, and ambushed itself instead. That, he told the kitten, was the most dramatic self-betrayal I've seen all week. The kitten blinked up at him like it had no idea what he meant, which was fair, because it was a bobcat. Then it pounced again and actually landed it, and Caleb felt the small warmth in his chest that had nothing to do with the sun. By late morning, the kittens were usually settled, bellies full and brains tired from play. Caleb would clean their enclosure in the calm window between awake and feral and awake and feral again. He shoveled soiled bedding, swapped out water pans, checked the fencing, and made sure no one had discovered a new way to escape. He had already learned that bobcats were not like puppies, even though their stampedes tried to trick you. Puppies wanted to be with you. Bobcats wanted to be near you only because you were interesting, edible, or in the way. The rescue had drilled it into him gently. The goal was release, and release required that they not see humans as comfort. Caleb respected that so much it ached, because he understood it in the same place he understood grief. Love was not always holding on. Sometimes love was building the ramp and stepping back. After cleaning came lunch for them, a lighter feeding, and then the part of the day Caleb dreaded more than any scratch or bite. Bath time. Not because he enjoyed it, but because the kittens did not, and 16 offended bobcats could turn a simple rinse into a full theatrical production. The rescue did not want baths as a habit, because it could chill them or stress them, and stress could lead to illness. But the night before, a storm had knocked over Caleb's compost bin, and 16 tiny geniuses had thrown a mud party in it like they had invented joy. By morning, several of them looked like they had been rolled in chocolate frosting and regret. Caleb set up a warm indoor mudroom station the rescue had approved, with towels, a small tub, and a heater nearby. He wore thick gloves, long sleeves, and the expression of a man about to negotiate with a gang. He opened the enclosure door carefully and called in a voice that was calm, because calm was contagious even when nobody wanted it to be. "All right, babies," he said, because he was human and therefore weak. "We're going to be clean." 16 pairs of eyes stared at him, and then the first kit bolted like it had heard the word taxes. That triggered the others, because bobcats are not big on individual decision-making when panic is available. They scattered, climbed, hid, and somehow one of them got on top of the enrichment platform and looked down like a tiny general surveying a battlefield. Caleb sighed so deeply it was practically a weather event. For anyone keeping track, he called toward the rescue volunteer on speakerphone, "This is bath number 4 and 5, and also my villain origin story." The volunteer, a cheerful woman named Denise, who had been doing this for 20 years, laughed so hard Caleb could hear her wheeze. "Stay patient," Denise said, "and remember, don't chase them like you're playing tag." "I am not playing tag," Caleb said, while absolutely chasing one under a bench. "I am participating in a very unwilling spa day." He used a towel technique the rehab center had taught him, wrapping gently but securely to prevent injury to both kitten and human. The first one screamed like Caleb was removing its soul, even though the water was warm and the soap was mild and approved. Caleb kept his voice soft, because fear listened more than anger ever did. "It's just a rinse," he murmured. "You're going to be so handsome you'll regret it." The kitten glared at him with betrayal in its whole face, then shook water everywhere the moment Caleb loosened the towel. It launched itself back into the enclosure and immediately rolled in the one remaining dirty patch like it had an appointment. Caleb stood there dripping, staring, and then he started laughing because the alternative was crying and he was not in the mood. "Denise," he said into the speaker, "I just watched a bobcat commit a crime on purpose." "Welcome to fostering," Denise said sweetly, and Caleb could hear the smile in her voice. By bath number 8, Caleb's hair was damp, his shirt was speckled, and his dignity had officially moved out. He lifted one particularly muddy boy who was built like a tiny wrestler, and the kitten made a sound that was half growl and half complaint. Caleb held him up like a reluctant trophy and said, "We're halfway through, buddy, and I don't know which of us is learning the lesson." The kitten stared, then gently bit Caleb's glove as if to say, "You are." Caleb finished the last bath with the exhausted triumph of a man who has survived a very small war. He dried them carefully, kept them warm, and returned each one to the enclosure with minimal fuss. 16 damp bobcats then did the same thing toddlers do after a bath, which was immediately attempt to get dirty again out of pure principle. Caleb watched them, shaking his head, and finally managed to corral them inside for the evening. "Come on," he coaxed. "Come in, you fuzzy little outlaws." They flowed in, one after another, and for a moment they looked like they might actually cooperate. Then one kit stopped at the threshold, turned around, and stared at Caleb with an intensity that made his skin prickle. Caleb froze, because that look was not play, not hunger, not mischief. It was alertness, sharp and sudden, like a switch had flipped in the kitten's brain. Denise's voice crackled through the speaker from inside Caleb's pocket, still there because she stayed on during tricky days. "What's wrong?" she asked, and Caleb did not answer right away because his ears had caught it too. A sound beyond the yard, faint but real, not a kitten sound and not a dog sound either. A low, throaty yowl, followed by a rhythm of steps moving along the tree line. Caleb's stomach tightened because he knew that sound, and he knew what it could mean. The rescue had told him the kittens had been found after a highway construction crew reported a den collapse near a culvert. No mother had been seen, and the assumption was that she had been hit or chased off or unable to return. But assumptions were not facts, and the woods were full of surprises. Caleb backed away from the enclosure slowly and looked toward the edge of his property. He saw movement in the shadows, a shape slipping between trunks with the silent confidence of something that belonged there. His first thought was coyote, and his second thought was no, because coyotes did not move like that. Then a larger shape stepped into a thin strip of moonlight, and Caleb's breath caught. A bobcat, an adult, lean, cautious, eyes glowing, ears tall and unmistakable, her body held low like a question. Caleb's hands went cold even though the night was mild. He had never seen a wild adult bobcat this close to his house, not in all his years living here. He should have felt thrilled, but what he felt was the heavy seriousness of responsibility. He kept still because sudden movement was an invitation to fear. Inside the enclosure, the kittens went silent in a way that made Caleb's scalp tingle. Not one of them cried. Not one of them scrambled, as if every small body had recognized a language older than noise. The adult bobcat moved closer, stopping at the outer fence line, sniffing. Her head tilted, and she made a soft, chuffing sound that was nothing like the shrieks of bath time. It was a sound that carried meaning, and the kittens pressed toward the fence like magnets. Caleb heard Denise inhale sharply on the speaker when she realized what was happening. "Caleb," she whispered, "don't get closer, and don't speak too much." "I'm not doing anything," Caleb whispered back, because his voice had turned into air. The bobcat's eyes flicked to him, and Caleb felt seen in a way that had nothing to do with being human. It felt like being evaluated, measured, placed into a category that was either threat or not threat. Caleb stood with his hands open at his sides, empty, offering no challenge. The adult bobcat moved along the fence, sniffing each panel, stopping where the kittens clustered. One of the kittens, the smallest girl with a cream spot on her nose, pressed her face against the mesh and chirped softly. The adult answered with another chuff, and then something happened that made Caleb's throat tighten hard. The adult bobcat sat down. Right there, a few feet from Caleb's careful construction, she sat like she was settling in, like she had found the right address. Caleb's mind raced, and then he remembered a detail from intake notes Denise had mentioned earlier. One of the kittens had arrived with a faint mark behind its ear, a tiny nick that looked old. Denise had wondered aloud if the mother had been ear-notched by researchers, or if it was an injury. Now, in the moonlight, Caleb saw it clearly on the adult Bobcat too. A tiny notch. A matching signature. Caleb swallowed, and his voice shook when he spoke into the phone. "Denise," he said, "I think she's their mother." Denise did not answer right away because she was thinking hard the way experienced rehabbers think. Then she said very softly, "If she is, this changes everything." Caleb felt tears sting his eyes for reasons he could not immediately name. Because it was a miracle, because it was proof, because it meant the story was not what they had assumed. It also meant there was a decision coming, and decisions in wildlife work were never simple. The mother bobcat stayed there for nearly 20 minutes, sniffing, listening, occasionally chuffing. Caleb did not move, did not approach, did not do anything except exist quietly and witness. Inside the enclosure, the kitten settled into a strange calm, as if the presence of her voice smoothed something in them. Then the mother stood, turned her head toward the woods, and paused. She looked back once, eyes catching moonlight like two small lanterns, and Caleb felt the unmistakable sensation of a message. Not gratitude, not friendliness, but something closer to acknowledgement. And then she vanished into the trees like she had never been there at all. Caleb finally exhaled, realizing he had been holding his breath like a child underwater. Denise's voice came through the speaker again, more urgent now. "Caleb, listen carefully," she said. "We need to adjust the plan starting tomorrow." Caleb leaned on the porch rail, staring at the dark tree line, heart thudding. "What plan?" he asked, and his voice sounded too small for his own ears. "The release plan," Denise said, and Caleb's stomach dropped even though he had known it was coming from the beginning. "We might be able to do a soft release earlier than expected if she keeps coming back, but we have to do it right." Caleb nodded even though Denise could not see him, because his body needed to agree with something. "What do I do?" he asked, and the question felt like a prayer. Denise's instructions were careful and specific, the way good rehab work always was. No more playful talking near the enclosure. Keep human presence minimal. Feed at consistent times, but avoid making it a Caleb equals food association. Add more natural cover inside, reduce visual exposure, and set up trail cameras to confirm the mother's visits without disturbing her. Caleb listened, absorbing every word, because suddenly this was not just about keeping kittens alive. It was about giving a mother back her family, if the wild would allow it. The next morning, Caleb woke before his alarm, because excitement is a rude roommate. He moved quietly through his kitchen, brewed coffee he barely tasted, and set up 2 trail cameras along the fence line. He wore gloves even while handling batteries, because habits in rehab work become rituals. When he opened the back door, the stampede happened again, because Bobcat kittens did not believe in sleeping in. They thundered out like tiny athletes, tails up, ears forward, and Caleb could not help the smile that pulled at his mouth. He did not speak much, though, because he remembered Denise's warning, and he remembered the mother's eyes. Breakfast was still chaos, because 16 mouths made 16 rules. Caleb still had to help them find bowls, sliding one treat here, another there, redirecting the pushiest boys to their own dishes. But now he did it with a new quietness, like he was part of a larger plan, like he was no longer the center of their story. He checked his emails, did his work, and stepped outside for playtime, but he kept it more focused, more distant. He hung scent trails for them to follow, dragged a feather lure less often, and added logs and brush piles that smelled like real woods. He watched them practice stalking behind cover, and he felt proud in a way that was almost painful. That afternoon, the plot twist deepened because the trail camera pinged Caleb's phone with a motion alert. He opened the video expecting a raccoon because raccoons treated his property like an all-night diner. Instead, the screen showed the mother bobcat returning in full daylight. She did not come empty-handed. In her mouth was a rabbit, limp and fresh, carried with the steady purpose of a provider. Caleb's hand flew to his own mouth, not to make noise, but to contain the sound that wanted to come out. The mother approached the fence and set the rabbit down just outside, then backed away and watched the kittens inside. The kittens pressed to the mesh, chirping, pacing, vibrating with instinct. Caleb watched the mother glance toward the woods and then back again, like she was checking the safety of the world. Denise had told Caleb that mothers sometimes did this near dens, sometimes teaching, sometimes testing. Now the mother bobcat was doing it at Caleb's handmade enclosure, as if Caleb had accidentally built a classroom. Caleb called Denise immediately, keeping his voice low, and Denise's reaction was not laughter this time. "That is huge," she said, and Caleb could hear emotion in her professionalism. "She's not just alive, she's still mothering, and she's trying to provision them." Caleb stared at the rabbit on the video again, and his chest ached. He thought of his own kids grown and scattered, calling when they remembered, visiting when life allowed. He thought of his late wife's empty gardening gloves still hanging by the garage door, waiting for hands that would never return. The mother bobcat did not have the luxury of waiting. She had only the present, only hunger, only instinct, and somehow she had found her way back. Denise's next instruction was the hardest thing Caleb had done in months. They would begin transitioning the kittens to less human-delivered food, placing carcass pieces and whole prey under controlled conditions, encouraging natural feeding. They would also prepare for a staged soft release, opening a secure gate at night when the mother was present, allowing the kittens to follow her out when ready. It was a plan that required patience and courage, because you did not get to hold their paws and walk them into the forest. You built the door, and then you trusted the wild to do what it had always done. That week became a blur of careful steps and tiny tragedies avoided by inches. Caleb reinforced the gate mechanism so it could be opened remotely with a rope from the porch, because humans should not stand close during release. He added more brush cover, installed a visual barrier so the mother would feel safer approaching, and reduced his time in the yard to essentials only. The kittens, meanwhile, continued to be ridiculous because growing up did not cancel comedy. One tried to drag a whole towel into a hide box like it was building interior design. Another stole a sibling's treat and then acted shocked when the sibling stole it back, as if fairness was a new invention. Bath time happened only once more, and Caleb swore it was the last time he would ever host a compost-based festival. The kittens did the same dramatic fleeing, and Caleb did the same calm towel technique, and Denise laughed again like a friend. But the laughter had a tender edge now, because they all knew the ending was approaching. On Friday night, the trail cameras showed the mother bobcat arriving earlier than usual. She paced the fence, chuffed softly, and then sat in the same spot as before, watching the enclosure with unwavering focus. Caleb stood at his porch window with the rope in his hand, heart pounding like a drumline. Denise was on the phone again, her voice steady and low, guiding him through each step. "Wait until she's calm," she whispered. "And make sure the yard is quiet. No lights, no sudden sounds." Caleb had turned off every exterior light, drawn curtains, silenced his phone, and even held his breath like that would help. The kittens inside the enclosure were awake, clustered near the gate, bodies humming with something older than fear. Caleb watched the mother bobcat stand and move closer, nose to the mesh, chuffing again. Then she stepped back and looked toward the woods, pausing as if she was listening for danger. Everything in her posture said, "Now," without ever making the word. Caleb's hands shook as he pulled the rope gently, releasing the latch he had designed for this moment. The gate opened a few inches, just enough for a small body to slip through, but not enough to look like a wide, obvious trap. For a heartbeat, nothing happened, and Caleb's stomach twisted with the fear that the kittens would not go. Then the smallest girl with the cream spot moved first. She slid through the gap like smoke, paused, and lifted her head toward the mother bobcat. The mother stepped forward, sniffed her quickly, and chuffed a sound that made Caleb's eyes burn. One by one, the other kittens followed, slipping out into the yard, staying low, moving the way they had practiced behind logs and brush. A few hesitated, because the world beyond fences was vast. But the mother bobcat stayed patient, guiding with her body, her voice, her calm. Caleb watched 16 little shadows become part of the night, and he realized he was smiling through tears he had not invited. The last kitten to leave was the muddy boy from bath number 8, because of course it was. He paused at the threshold and turned his head back toward Caleb's porch, eyes catching a faint reflection. For a second, Caleb thought, absurdly, that the kitten might come back, might demand one more treat, one more ridiculous moment. Instead, the kitten blinked slowly, then slipped into the darkness without a sound. Caleb stood frozen, rope still in hand, listening to the night swallow them. Denise whispered into the phone, "They're out," like she was afraid to break a spell. Caleb nodded, unable to speak, because his throat had filled with everything he had been holding for months. The mother bobcat waited until the last kit had joined the cluster. Then she led them toward the tree line. They moved in a loose line, not perfect, not orderly, but real. And Caleb felt the strange relief of watching a story return to its rightful owner. At the edge of the woods, the mother paused and looked back one final time. In that moment, Caleb saw not a pet, not a symbol, not a miracle meant for him. He saw a wild mother doing what wild mothers do, surviving, searching, reclaiming. He saw that his job had never been to keep them, only to bridge them. Then she turned and vanished, 16 kittens flowing after her like water, and the yard became just a yard again. Caleb stood there for a long time, hearing nothing but crickets and his own heartbeat. When he finally stepped back inside, his house felt quiet in a way that did not hurt as sharply as it once had. The coffee mug on his desk was still there, cold and forgotten, and he laughed softly at the normality of that. The next morning, Caleb woke early out of habit and walked to the back door before he remembered. He opened it anyway, half expecting a stampede, half expecting to be surprised again. The yard was empty, dew on the grass, sunlight on the fence, and the enclosure stood silent like a playground after recess. Caleb felt the ache rise, then settle, because it was supposed to ache. 16 lives had filled his days, and now those days were his again, and that was the point. He checked the trail cameras because he could not help himself. The footage from dawn showed movement near the tree line, and Caleb leaned closer, breath catching. There, in the far background, was the mother bobcat. Sitting in the shadows and clustered around her were shapes that could only be her kittens. One of them chased a leaf and missed, just like before. Another pounced on nothing with absolute confidence, just like before. The mother watched, patient, present, alive. Caleb sat down at his kitchen table and let the tears come without embarrassment. They were not sad tears, not exactly, though sadness was braided into them. They were the kind of tears that happened when something ended the right way, even if your heart still wanted more scenes. He called Denise and told her what he saw, and Denise laughed with relief that sounded like a prayer answered. "That," she said, "is why we do it." Caleb nodded, looking out the window at the quiet enclosure, and his voice came out rough but steady. "Fostering 16 bobcat kittens," he said, "was the most exhausting joy I've ever had." Denise chuckled. "Give it a week," she teased, "and you'll be asking for another foster." Caleb looked around his kitchen, at the permits, the gloves, the towels, the schedule taped to the fridge. He thought of the stampede, the chaos, the baths, the muddy crimes, the rabbit at the fence, and the mother's moonlit eyes. He thought of how his hands had built a home that was never meant to be permanent, and how his heart had survived that truth. He smiled, slow and genuine, the way people smile when they realize they can carry love without owning it. "Denise," he said, "I'm not asking for another foster." There was a pause on the line, and Caleb's smile widened because he could hear Denise bracing for refusal. Then Caleb added, with a soft laugh that surprised even him, "But if the Bobcat distribution system decides otherwise, I'm not going to argue with the universe."